I wish I knew this about Glock before I got one. I'll be back. Welcome back to the LocaCarnivore, the hunting guns and adventure channel for smart people. You're smart because you're watching LocaCarnivore. LocaCarnivore wanted a famous Austrian to talk about the Glock pistol, which is also Austrian, but he couldn't afford the really famous one, so he got me instead. Oh, excuse me, I've got to take this. Yeah, this is the Austrian. No, the other one. Okay, thank you. Remember, of course, to stick around to the end of the video. You will really enjoy it. There's plenty of information all the way through. To get started, this is not going to be an anti-Glock rant. This is really just tips for people who might be considering their first Glock. Things that I've found out over the years. I've had Glocks for a very long time, decades in fact, and found them to be generally pretty good, but there are things you should know about them before you get one. And I will try to recall them, although it may not be total recall. As I said, I am not the famous Austrian. I don't have as much muscle, but at least I'm blonde. There's one other big difference between me and that other Austrian. You wouldn't have to pay me to make a movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. Many of the things I'm going to talk about here are things that most people know about Glocks or might know about Glocks, but I want to put them all in one place. Now, I did a video not too long ago about what I should have known about in 1911 before I got one, and I got a lot of comments back by, geez, didn't you know about this or didn't you know about that? Or if you just looked at one, you'd know. That video, just like this one, is not necessarily things I didn't always know. Sometimes I knew them, and other things I discovered once I got one. But the idea here is to give you, if you're thinking about a Glock, some food for thought, so you will be better informed. Okay, let's get something straight up front. The Glock pistol is not made from heavy-metic polyalloy, liquid metal. As you know, liquid metal cannot assume complex machines, only simple stabbing weapons, knives, swords, etc. Now, one of the first things that you'll find about the Glock is the grip angle. People either like a Glock grip angle or they don't like a Glock grip angle. The Glock is at 22 degrees off center. Unlike guns like the 1911, which is 17 degrees, this 22 degree angle comes from the Luger, which is another great German pistol. If you've ever held one, you'll know they point very well, but some people don't like this grip angle. Really, it comes down to a matter of how you point your finger. If you point your finger with a big fist like that, then 1911 is better for you. But if you roll your fingers like that and point like that, the Glock and a Luger, anything of that angle will work very well for you. So the important thing is to try the Glock and make sure it points well for you. And I am the other Austrian. There's no truth to the rumors that Danny DeVito and I are related. Another big thing about the Glocks that you need to know about is the early Glocks, the Gens 1 through 3, they had very slippery grip textures and people had trouble hanging onto them, especially the big guns like the 10mm like this or the 45s. The grips could be quite slippery, especially if your hands were a little sweaty. So a lot of people had to use what I call the rubber band grips, like from Hogue and Pachmayr, and they go all the way around the grip. Unfortunately, on the big frame guns, that makes the problem even worse in that the grip is even bigger, and some people have trouble with this large grip. Now the Gen 4 on up, Gen 4 and 5, went to a different texture. It is much better, but it is still a bit of a compromise. You may find even with the Gen 4 or 5 grip texture, you may still want a wraparound rubber grip, or you might have to put on some of the skateboard tape or the rubber tape that is out there from various manufacturers just to get a better grip on the gun. You're going to have to experiment and find out what works for you. The other big problem about the grip is the flat sides. If you look at the gun, it is very flat on the side. And some people do not like that. It does not feel their hand very well. In fact, quite frankly, it feels like you're hanging onto a 2x4. Some of the aftermarket grips can help with that. They have a little bump in them that fills that out like the Hogue. But some people, again, it makes the grip too large for them. Other gun manufacturers have improved significantly with their polymer frames so that the grips are more rounded, more friendly to the hand, like the SIG P320, the Smith & Wesson M&P, or the XD series from Springfield. Those are just examples. There are other guns out there that have very good grips. And some that, despite everything that we know about the flat-sided Glock, they still make the same mistake, FN. Now, one thing I suggest you do not tell people when you have a Glock with you is, I'm going to need your jacket, your boots, and your motorcycle. Before I go on, the LocaCarnivore wanted me to remind you to give a big like to this video, a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. He really wants you to subscribe. And of course, ring that bell so you'll be notified every time you get a new video out. Another big complaint about the Glocks is the trigger. The trigger has a the triggers are notorious for being rather heavy and long pulls with a very firm ball at the end. The average Glock trigger breaks at 4 to 6 pounds according to Glock, and they make even heavier triggers, like they made an insane 12-pound one for the New York Police Department. Why they couldn't deal with the regular one, I don't know. But maybe it's something in the water. Now there are aftermarket triggers you can drop in, shadow systems, etc., etc. And these can be, even Glock has their new, what they call their marksman trigger, which is quite a bit better than the stock trigger. The only problem is you want to be very careful when you modify a Glock or any other gun that you carry for self-defense. If the trigger is too light, for instance, or people might just say you modified the gun to an unsafe condition, so you have to be careful about that. The real thing about dealing with the Glock trigger, like any other gun, is training. You just simply have to train with the gun. The more you train with it, the better you will get. Since we are talking about the trigger, the Glock safe action, that's what Glock calls their trigger, is actually fairly safe, but there are certain things you're going to have to be very aware of when you have one of these. First of all, you have got to keep your pointy finger off the bang lever until you're really ready to shoot this gun. Where people have problems with this gun is they have their finger on the trigger and they inadvertently discharge the gun, which is another reason why Glock has a fairly heavy pull to discourage that sort of thing. In addition to having good trigger finger discipline, you must also always carry the Glock pistol in a holster which covers the entire trigger guard area. You don't want anything to get in there and accidentally discharge the gun. The good thing about the Glock trigger system is that there is no manual safety that you have to remember to take off before you shoot the gun, such as in 1911, which could become a problem if you're trying to shoot the gun in an emergency under a lot of stress. The downside is if somebody takes your gun away, they will be able to use the gun very easily, so there will be nothing like a manual safety to get between them and using the gun against you. I still remember the day when I bought my first Glock. I went into the gun store and I asked the guy behind the counter for a Nino pulse laser in the 50 megawatt range, but he said only what you see on the shelf, so I had to buy a Glock. And a quick plug for the LocaCarnivore. Remember, he's got no support right now from any sponsors or anybody like that, and he doesn't do the affiliate thing, so the only support he's got is from Patreon. So if you would go down to the link in the description, that would be very helpful, and I would appreciate it too. Now, the other thing about the Glock, which is not always the best, you have to get used to it and be ready for it, is how you disassemble the gun. I'm not going to take it apart because I don't want to piss off YouTube. But the two major problems with disassembling the Glock pistol is, first of all, after you clear the weapon and safe it, you have to point the gun in a safe direction and pull the trigger so that the striker is not cocked anymore. And that is something that has got people in trouble if they do not clear their weapon correctly before trying to clean it. So again, the Glock requires training and discipline. Lots of discipline. The other thing about disassembling the Glock is that they rely on these two little tabs that you have to pull down. Again, I'm not going to take the gun apart, But if you pull these tabs down, and on the smaller guns especially, it can be very difficult sometimes to get on them and pull them right back at the same time. Plus you also have to hold the slide back just a little bit, and that can be an interesting dance to get that all coordinated. Now on the upside, the positives are the gun comes apart very easily once you do master the technique and you just have some major components. You don't have a lot of fiddly little parts running around like a 1911. Oh, the 1911 fanboys are going to get on me about that, I know. As I said, I'm a big fan of the Glock pistol, but I'm not a fanboy. Another thing about the Glock that you need to be aware of is what is called an unsupported chamber. They have what is called an unsupported firing chamber. All that means is that the bottom part of the chamber mouth is just relieved just a little bit in order to improve the feed angles up the feed ramp and into the chamber. This greatly enhances reliability, which is something that the Glock pistol is noted for, is its reliability. I'm going to show you a picture of a unsupported barrel. It's a 1911. Sorry, I don't have a Glock one to show you. And a supported barrel, which is again also from a 1911. Now the thing about the unsupported barrel is allegedly that does not completely support the case head of the cartridge case. That is true to a degree, and people feel that that lack of support causes a failure point at the case head. I have talked to Glock about this quite a bit, and I've also done quite a bit of research. The real issue is if you use anything other than standard factory-loaded ammunition. Factory-loaded ammunition to SAMI specs perfectly fine in the Glock unsupported barrel. Where people get in troubles with these hand loads, they try to push the envelope and then they have a failure because yes, indeed, that little bit of the case head is not supported, and in an overpressure load, the case head will rupture. The good thing though about the Glock is designed, if you do have a case head rupture, all the force goes down through the magazine well and out of the bottom of the gun. That way you don't have your fingers blown off. Now to fix this, quote unquote fix this, you can use an aftermarket barrel, which that can be problematic too. There's a lot of aftermarket barrels that are not very reliable with the Glock, so you have to make sure you're getting a good quality one, and that you have to test it and test it and test it and make sure it is reliable with your ammunition. And frankly, if you're not getting enough power out of your current gun, you don't need to hot rod the gun you do have. You need to go get a bigger, more powerful gun. It's that simple. Something else you should know about the Glock, the rifling system that they use is a superior system, of course. It is called Polygonal or Polygonal. Although if you pronounce it Polygonal, people might think you're from St. George, Utah. Polygonal rifling, what it does not have grooves cut in the barrel. It has flats that are hammer forged into the barrel. This makes for a very strong barrel, and you get actually better velocities because it engages the bullet better. The downside is Glock does not recommend you use lead, cast lead bullets in this gun. They only want you to use jacketed ammunition. The main reason is that the polygonal sides, they swage the lead hard into the rifling, and it makes it very difficult to clean it out. And if you do not clean it out well, over time you will build up the lead and it will constrict the bore, and you could have an overpressured condition. Let's talk about a good thing about the Glocks, but you do need to know about them, and that is the Glock magazine. It is perhaps the 8th wonder of the world. As you can see, it has a steel insert into the magazine that's surrounded by a casing of polymer. What this does is the polymer keeps the steel. What this does is the polymer helps the steel from getting deformed, especially on the feed lips. Say you drop the magazine or something, and the steel keeps the polymer from overflexing and perhaps cracking or breaking. What you find in aftermarket magazines is they're typically only polymer. What you can have as a problem with just polymer magazines is that the feed lips have a lot of more flex in them, and they can crack or deform, and that can lead to feed problems. So you want to make sure that you use the Glock magazines. The other thing is, as long as the Glock magazine is in the same family caliber, i.e. like 9mm or 40, You can go up or down in capacity very easily. If you have a smaller, a compact or subcompact gun, you can carry larger magazines than what came with the gun. Hey, if you're looking for even more content, go over to the LocaCarnivore's website. The link's in the description, of course. Go over there, visit, and while you're there, go to the store that they have, get some LocaCarnivore merchandise. You'll really appreciate it. There is a myth about the Glock pistol, though, that you need to be aware of, and that is there's this thing going around that says Glocks don't need any maintenance, you don't need to clean them, you don't need to lubricate them. And I'm going to get a lot of pushback from the fanboys, the Glock fanboys. Oh, there's one now. But the fact is, the gun does need oil, you do need to clean it. Now, will it go a lot longer than, say, a 1911 without a cleaning? Sure. Under field conditions, they're very robust guns and they can take a lot of abuse, but only up to a certain point. They're mechanical devices, they're not magical things. A lot of people out there also think that the Glock pistol is completely invincible. No matter what happens to it, it will continue to run. This is not true. If you watch all the torture tests out there from various ones such as Military Arms Channel and other people like that who have done torture tests, especially with mud. You get mud up in that trigger mechanism or in the striker area, it's done. It's a mechanical device. It's not magic. I've also seen a lot of Glocks malfunction in these gunfight videos that are out there on YouTube and various other places. I'll put a link to Active Self-Protection's channel down in the description. You can go over there. He does a great job. John Correa and the gang do a great job with that, much better than I could do. And I'll let you watch those, but if you watch it, especially a lot of law enforcement guns, the Glocks, do malfunction in the middle of fights. There's no post-mortem though, as we don't find out exactly what happens. We just sort of have to guess and everything. But it usually comes down to the basic things: maintenance, poor magazine condition or not the right magazine, bad ammunition or improper ammunition, and or improper technique. You do have to keep your hand way up in the Glock. That's what it's designed for. And you also have to keep a very firm wrist on the Glock. One problem that has come up with the Glocks, in particular the mid-frame 40 Smith & Wesson chambered guns, especially the Gen 3s, the frame rail area for where you put a weapon light or laser is a little on the flexible side, shall we say. Even Glock admits that they had to redesign this. But with one particular brand of light, I believe it was the Surefire, if it was not installed correctly and over-torqued, it would pinch the frame and cause a lot of slide drag, which then made the gun unreliable. There's actually a very unfortunate video out there where a police officer is killed because that exact model of Glock with that exact light on it malfunctions at the wrong moment during the fight, and unfortunately he is killed. So you do have to be aware of that if you get the Surefire light. And you can go to Surefire's website and they tell you all about it. They're very forthcoming about it, and Glock is very forthcoming about it as well. They fixed the problem for the most part on their later guns. They understood there was a problem, but they still recommend highly that you follow the Surefire instructions when you torque the light down to the rail so that it's not over tight. Now, Glock may claim perfection with their guns, and they're very good, but there have been issues over the years. For instance, back in the early 2000s, a number of 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson pistols left the factory with improper machining, I believe, in the slide and frame areas. This caused these guns to be unreliable. However, to Glock's credit, once they found out, they did recall the guns, reworked them, and also fixed the problems on the assembly line. So far, from what I understand, there has been no repeat of this. And of course, if you talk to Glock, they are very forthcoming about it. They will even guide you if you're looking at a used Glock in that period, in that caliber. You can give them the serial number, and they will tell you if that was part of the affected production run. Another thing is that the Gen 5 guns, particularly the Glock 19 and the Glock 20, have reports of certain issues. Glock seems to be aware of that. Apparently, they've done some redesign work on some of it. My understanding. You check me out on that though, and if you find out anything different, go down in the comments and let me know about it. Primarily the Glock 20 Gen 5, some people apparently had some problems with heavy bear loads and whatnot. I don't know if those were their hand loads or factory loads like the super hot stuff from Buffalo Bore, etc. So you might want to check into that before you get a Gen 5 Glock 20. The Glock 42 can have some issues, the 380. It's primarily due to improper technique when using the pistol, but some of the early production guns did have problems in the hands of reviewers. There's lots of stuff out there, you can go watch it. Again, it might be ammunition related, I don't know. 380s are always very difficult guns to get to run correctly, all these little tiny mouse guns. We also did a review of the Glock 42. I'll put the link down in the description there. You can go look at it. We had a couple of issues right out of the box with the thing, but it since has worked itself loose. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, about Glock that I don't like is that Glock, at least lately, now that they've got into the Gen 4 and the Gen 5s, frankly, they seem to just be getting cheap. I think they're under a lot of pressure to keep their prices under control, given all the low cost, but still fairly high quality guns coming onto the market, which compete directly with the Glock. As a result, I've noticed that especially the Gen 4s and the Gen 5s, when you get them out of the box initially, they have no oil, and I mean no oil in them at all. On top of that, back when you got a Glock back in the day, they used to have this little bronze paste that would be in the frame rails and various other places. That was a break-in lube to help the parts get happy with each other as the gun wore in, and they don't put that in anymore. So I think in order to save some money. In addition, if you pick up and look at a Gen 4 or a Gen 5, in my opinion, especially when it comes to like the large guns like the Glock 20, the Gen 4s just seem to feel a little less robust. I mean, they still work good, they still work great, but there's just something about them. They just don't feel quite as tight and as put together as the original guns were, the Gen 1s through 3s. I don't know what it is. It's just a thing. Maybe it's really nothing. Well, I don't think they've compromised the safety or the reliability of the gun. I think maybe they're taking a little bit of work out of the gun just to save a little extra labor costs and some steps and things while they make the guns to keep the cost down. And I would urge Glock to not go down this road. The cost-cutting road never leads to a good place. I have some advice for you Glock fanboys. You've got to grow up. Just like I told John to grow up so we would have an endless parade of tedious sequels. But the biggest difference between me and that other Austrian is I wouldn't have to have gone through every Sarah Connor in the phone book just to find the one I was sent back through time to get. If you want to check out the video of what I wish I knew before I got a 1911, the link will be coming up here at the end screen. You can check it out. Thank you for taking your valuable time to watch us at the LocaCarnivore. We really do appreciate it. And now it's time for me to run to the chopper!